Hey everyone, so we are at our final assignment here where you guys are supposed to reflect back. And here I think that it's really important we start to understand that regardless of the genre of writing, if we're doing analytical writing, not much changes. And so we can start by understanding not much changes. Um, your reflection assignment still calls for the basic setup. We should have an intro that introduces us to what your purpose is, who your audience is, all of that stuff. We should know coming into it that you're talking to us, and we should know what you're talking to us about. And then from there, you analyze whatever it is you're presenting, which we'll go through each of these things in a second. Second thing, it's a personal statement. Whenever we hear the words personal here, we can always expect to use I. However, something to keep in mind is that half the time when we use the word I, we don't really need it. And so here, that's all I'm really trying to say is that when you say something like, I think that this is important, why wouldn't you just say this is important? It's something we call rhetorical grammar, but in English, which we call an analytical language, where word order really matters, the fact that the main sentence is I think is very sort of, or it can be read as sort of egocentric in this context. In an interpersonal relationship context, it's actually super important you use these ideas like I think or I feel, but in an academic imperative sort of way, we know that you think it. It's really important we just get to what you think. We shouldn't try and hide that behind that you think it, for example. And so we can just get rid of the I think that in those kinds of statements and just leave it as it is. Um, Lastly, even though it's a personal statement, you should be using evidence. And one of the things that I've been trying to show all of my classes over the course of the year is that it really doesn't matter what you're talking about. You should always, always, always provide evidence, and that evidence should be credible. And so here, much like in the DQs, that evidence can be personal expression. It could be things that you've done. It could be, in this case, which is very important, something you did in your integrative project. But we need evidence to support your view, your thesis, which brings us to the actual assignment. 6 to 800 words, roughly a single page, single spaced, or 2 pages double spaced approximately. Um, we should be able to explain how science and humanities are specifically integrated within our project. Now, for me, for the project, I asked for you just give me a little description so that I could see what you were doing. This is a much larger question. The project should be sort of a stand-in for your own perception, and you may not have thought of it that way, but as I have tried to show all of my classes over the last year, often we do things that are very, very much rooted in our beliefs or what we do, and in fact, it can be a better indicator of what we believe because we can often say we believe something without acting on it. And so, what we want to do here is actually look back at this project, this thing that you've made, and ask ourselves, what does this tell me about how I feel or think about how integrated the sciences and the humanities are, or should be, or this is where you're coming up with an argument. And that argument should be about what you see as this integration, as evidenced by whatever you made. We should have two references. You can use books from the class. A lot of you guys were talking about things from books from the class. That works. Any research you would have done to help you make the project. For those of you who were making children's stories, I often pushed you to an article about how Dr. Seuss rewrote his scripts to apply to children. That'd be a great resource. It tells you and informs us about how you went about writing it. Interestingly, it's also very much rooted in child psychology, which is a very STEMmy issue, just a way of incorporating more science there if that's the route you went. You should also look at the rubric. I didn't have it here. So when we look at this assignment and its elements, we should understand a few things. We should understand a little bit of what's being asked of you. So you should have a thesis, and that thesis should be making a grand claim. What do I mean by grand? I don't mean grandiose. I mean a larger claim. It shouldn't just be about the project, but it should be about how you view it. The project is evidence of a much larger truth about you. And this is what we call inductive reasoning. It's very, very much the foundation of how we make these kinds of arguments. We see something small, in your case, this project, and we try and make a larger argument out of it. Something that, in this case, you're like, I made this project, but here's how that project is evidence of how I view this integration. So that's what I mean. We're moving up what we call a level of abstraction from here's my project to here's overall a view that I have about this integration. Something else is that I already asked you guys to just give me a little bit of, hey, I did this to code in for this, a description of the actual project. That's a great place to start looking at these integrations and how these things worked. You should be using evidence from your research or from the books or from whatever you did to help construct your project. It's really helpful to start seeing very, very rooted basic STEMmy issues. It's one of the reasons why I push back on so many of your projects about STEM, where you're just like, I want to talk about this big grand idea in STEM. And I'm like, that's a very reductionist view of what's happening there. For example, some people talk to me about learning styles. And I was like, well, really, if you get into the STEM of it, the science of it, there are like 50 learning styles. Our overly reduced version of 4 isn't very conducive to seeing the grander scale of things. And so that's why I pushed you guys into that evidence, is to actually make you guys have something for this part, but also so that you are actually integrating science or STEM into your assignment. And you should be discussing how this smaller project, this smaller thing, is part of the larger view you have. That's what we want from your topic sentences. So you might say something like, hey, the humanities really helps people see STEM for what it is, or vice versa. Great. How did that work in your project? And so you'd be like, okay, well, here's one of the views about how it helps. Topic sentence. Evidence. Here's what I did in my project that shows how it helps. Discussion. How is this part of this grander view? And then we transition to the next part, which again should be a smooth transition between segments. We're trying to argue about this grander view, not about each individual aspect of our project. And so that's what we're looking for in this assignment. It is very short. It should have 2 or 3 pieces of evidence. It should have these 2 resources as dictated by this assignment. It should be written in APA format, APA 7th. We've been talking about that all semester. Other than that, this is what we're hoping for from these projects. If you have questions, of course, feel free to come out and chat with me about them. I still have office hours this week and next for the projects. So if you need anything else, just let me know. Otherwise, this is our last assignment. I hope this class was good for you guys. It was interesting for me. I definitely have ideas about things that I'm going to be doing differently next time, as this was my first time teaching the class, but I am very interested in your guys' perspectives as well. One of the things we hoped for was a healthy appreciation of the other side. So if you're a very STEMmy person, great. By the way, that's a great way to start the intro, is introducing us to this concept of which side of the fence are you mostly on? Which side did you discount? That might help to inform us about where we're going. So again, if you have questions, let me know. Otherwise, I hope this video finds you well. It's the last assignment for our class. Have a great break, and we will see you later.